So first exercise we're starting off with is a bit of isolation work. Generally speaking with legs, I like to do what's called a priming exercise. So the leg extension is our primer for the rest of the leg work. So we're doing 3 sets here, and it's basically 15 reps of a moderate weight and then 15 partial reps, and then a 10-second isometric where you're pushing as hard as you can at the very end in the peak contraction. So it's a tough one to start out with, but it's going to make sure that your knees are well warmed up, that your quads are warm, and that you're ready to rock then when it gets to the really hard stuff. And just with your positioning on the leg extension, sometimes people will generally tend to turn their thighs outward a little bit, and they'll have their toes up like that. So they'll go kind of like this, like that, with the thighs turned out, which can put a lot of jarring force into your knees. So it's not the best thing for your knees. So you actually want to be locked in so that your thighs are pointing straight up to the ceiling, and that you're not putting that unnecessary strain on the outside of your knees. And then another thing too is your foot position. Some people will point their toes, some people will turn their feet out. We're looking to keep the toes pointed up all the time towards us. So the entire time you're keeping your toes jammed straight up. And then also on the lockout as well. When we come into that lockout, we want to really squeeze in the lockout, not just throw the weight up and then come back down. We're going to really contract hard at that peak contraction point, really squeeze as hard as you can, rather than just throw up and back down, throw up and back down. So try to use more control with the leg extension, because it's one of those exercises where people tend to just fire up and down and have very little control. And the same comes then as you're coming down towards the bottom end, to kind of cushion the speed on the way down. So you're not letting the weight just drop down, you're controlling it down and then getting ready to drive back up again. You're not letting it kind of ever swing loose. So you have control over the entire movement. That's the key for these. Right, so we're going to work on now into the giant sets. Now that we have our primer done, so the giant sets are basically 3 exercises. We're doing a sissy squat, so bodyweight sissy squat. Then we're doing a reverse dumbbell lunge, and then we're going to finish off the giant set then with some hack squats. So this is all about quads. Basically, the whole giant set is kind of quad dominant, and the volume is pretty high. So the rep range will be pretty high. You'll see the workout there, the actual rep range for it, but if you can, try to keep the volume pretty high for these things. And again, the reason I'm leaving the hack squat for the last exercise is I'm trying to pre-exhaust, so that hack squat is brutally hard, because the hack squat here in Kings is very stiff. It's incredibly stiff, it's heavy already, but we want that to be the absolute like mincer, all right? So make things hard for yourself on purpose, it's good for you. So we're on to the giant sets now. And the idea behind the giant sets is there's no break, there's no rest apart from actually traveling to the next exercise. And I've kept them all quad dominant. And a kind of tip for you that if you are doing giant sets, try to keep exercises where you're not actually hogging the whole gym, because you'll find it very difficult if you're having multiple machines in use. So things like dumbbells or racks in combination with the machine is a better kind of way to do it. We're going to do 15 reps of sissy squats, bodyweight, 10 reps aside then of reverse lunges. And then we're doing 15 reps plus of hack squats. So if we hit 15, we keep going to failure. Fuck. Horrible. Absolutely horrible. And there's 2 more to go. I'm going to keep the same weight for the next round. If the next round there's still some left in the tank, we'll go heavier again on round 3, but I'm going to hedge a bet and say we have enough loaded here. Again, the hack squat is already heavy with nothing on it because the carriage is so stiff, so plenty of weight on it already, and because the volume is so high, we don't have to worry about overloading too much weight today. So we've gotten through the first one, so that's the first rotation of the giant set. Going to rotation number 2, and I've made the hack squat. I've just added 20 kilos to the hack squat. I don't need to go into huge weight gain in the hack squat because, again, I hit like 20 reps there. I'm going to probably go for 25 reps here with the extra 20 kilos on. So the first set is always gives you room to push higher on the next one. So don't ever blow your load in the first one.
What made you change your mind? You just told the people that you're keeping the weight the same. Is there a reason why you...
Because I suppose when you immediately finish the set, you kind of think that, fuck, that was a pretty, like, you know, you're trying to gauge it immediately. And even after a minute or 2 of a bit of recovery, you can kind of reassess. You can kind of see, okay, was I able before? And yeah, realistically, if you put a gun to my head, I can do a bit more. And again, that's only the first set. There's loads left in the tank. So you could hold back or you could push on a little bit. I'm being very kind of, very reserved in the amount of weight I've gone up there in a hack squat because I know the second set will be tough. But if the second set's doable again, I'll go up again. So it's kind of one of those things where you can kind of make a call straight away, or you can wait a minute or 2, see if you have the energy in the tank, and if you do, go for it. So that's why we've gone up there. We've kept, obviously it's bodyweight for the bodyweight sissy squats. I wouldn't weight those anyway. And then the reverse lunges, but the sissy squat is one of those ones actually where nobody does them this way because this is the real old school way of doing them. And I'm actually tracking my knees really far over my toes. So I'm on purpose trying to get my knees as far over my toes as possible. And you'll notice that when I do them, I'm actually letting my hip roll forward. So I'm not dropping my hip down. I'm letting my hips roll forward like that. And that's actually putting a huge stretch into my quads as I drop my knees to the floor. So people with bad knees probably shouldn't do these. But generally speaking, if you've got good joint health, these are fine. Also, if you're well warmed up. So this isn't an exercise you'd ever do at the start of your session. That's why we did the leg extensions. I'm pretty warmed up now. I have knee sleeves on as well. And again, if you're going to try these, so if you are going to try these, start off with a really partial range of motion. Don't go as deep as I'm going. Just get comfortable with the movement because it's quite unnatural. And just with the foot placement then, I go for a neutral foot placement, so shoulder width apart, toes slightly turned out. So I'm tracking my knees out and away, like that. Okay, so literally just this deep if you're just starting out. And if you want as well with your heels, you can keep your heels off the floor the whole time, so you're never letting your heels hit the floor. So you're keeping the tension on constant to your quads. Your heels don't touch the floor. Tom Platt special. Felt a lot heavier, but we'll go up again. So another 10 kilos So an extra 5 aside on again. There's a little bit more left, so let's go for it. Fuck. Oh. Ay. Fuck. Oh. Right. Right. Hey. It's all fun again until you actually do it. So, there's a lot to be said for the higher volume stuff as well. If you get very used to doing low volume work, to switch it up for a block of 6 or 8 weeks and move into this kind of higher volume work, it will absolutely destroy you in a good way. And you get some good adaptation from it, but it's very, very, very rough, especially when you're starting into an off season and eating loads of food. So you want to get sick. Now my legs are like steel, like totally steel. So what better time to do something nice and heavy? And these 2 sets that we're doing are rest pause sets. So we're aiming for 16 reps minimum. So if it takes 3 or 4 breaks to get to the 16, that's fine. But we have to get 16 reps no matter what. So you can try to, you're going to aim to as many in a row as you can, and then rest and keep going until you hit your 16. That's the idea behind the rest pause sets. And again, they're fairly high intensity. So I wouldn't tell a beginner to do rest pause training. If you're kind of a bit more advanced and you're training a few years, maybe try to do these rest pause techniques, or even training to failure as well. It's probably not the wisest thing if you're a beginner, but if you're advanced, absolutely by all means do a little bit of failure training. But I only have it once in a session. We're going to failure 1 time in a session just for this exercise. I'll just say as well, I'm going to go for a wide stance here with these because I want to get a little bit of adductors worked into the equation. So I'm going for a wider stance. And when you are using the leg press, like coming up here really high, unless you're on purpose trying to hit your glutes, is a bit of a waste of time. We want to get the quads worked in hard, so we're going to drop the feet down nice and low so that your knees are going to track over your toes and you're going to actually get a stretch in your quads. Because if I have my foot low down on the carriage here, it's going to allow my knee to track over my toes as I come down. And again, it's going to stretch my quad out more. So I'm going to put my quad into a kind of more vulnerable position, and it's going to make my quad have to work that a little bit harder. So go for as low a stance as your mobility will allow. So people have different ranges of ankle mobility, so how far they can push their foot up and down, for example. If you have very stiff ankles, you won't be able to go very low on the carriage, but if you're, so you have to go higher. If you have that range of motion in your ankle and you've got good knees, there's no reason why you can't drop your feet down nice and low and place all the stress in your quads. You won't be able to lift as heavy when you drop your feet down low, but that's okay. Take your ego out of the equation because you're trying to tax the muscle, not impress Instagram. First set done, and there's a little bit more gas in the tank. As I said earlier, the first set is not the one where you put all your eggs in the basket. The second set now, we only have 2 sets of these. This next set now is the all or nothing set. So this is the set where now we up the ante a little bit. We're going to tack a plate on each side. I'm going to push that a little bit further again. 16 reps is our number. I'm going to push for the 16 again now this. My lower back's a little bit tight the last week or so it's causing a little bit of stress on my lower back, dropping my knees to my chest. So I'm having to, on purpose, be a little bit smarter with how I'm training legs at the moment. So that's the reason why I'm not lifting as heavy as I normally would. But I'm trying to maximize the stimulation on my legs. So I'm trying to be smart about how I train and trying to like stimulate my quads as much as I can without loading a shitload of weight on my lower back where possible. So you have to kind of play what you have rather than either get injured or not train at all. Right. So again, when we're doing these rest pause sets, it's a little bit longer of a break, so 90 seconds is kind of fair enough for these. But for most sets on legs, for me in general, I try to stick to a minute for the average exercise. If I'm just doing 3x10 or 3x12, then I think a minute is more than ample. But when we're pushing the boat out a little bit more, it's 90 seconds in between sets. And if you're doing something like a muscle round, which is 6 rounds of 4 reps, again, that's a rest pause technique. I would go up to 2 minutes in between for those. But again, like any rest pause technique is going to be hard on your nervous system. So you're going to need to take that little bit of a longer break to let your CNS recover a little bit so that you can actually perform the next set well. Because remember, your CNS is what allows your muscles to fire and allows for coordination.
For people who don't know what CNS is?
Your central nervous system. So the signal from your brain to your muscles, basically keeping the show on the road, keeping me standing up right now. That is actually what's responsible for coordination, for muscular contraction, and then for what we call rate of firing. So how quickly the muscles can fire and recruit, that's what the CNS does. And when we do something that's pushing towards failure and really taxing your CNS, really pushing really hard, you're going to get that immediate fatigue. So that's why your balance decreases. That's why your coordination drops down as you get tired. It's that nervous system fatigue. So we got our 16. We hit our 16 there. So again, if you're doing a rest pause set and you get to that like rep range that you're aiming for, just keep going. So the same for doing muscle rounds. If you hit the required number, you keep pushing towards failure. The idea being, when you're gauged in the weight that you're using, when you're trying to pick what weight to use, you want to be hitting that point where you can barely get the goal weight, the goal number reps, so 16 reps. So this could actually be a little bit heavier again because there was 2 reps left in the tank. I went over, as in 2 over. I hit 18 reps instead of 16. So again, I could have gone a little bit heavier again here for this, but again, we can log that in a logbook, and then next week then, we know for next week. So we're gonna finish off a session with 3 sets of calf raises and then 1 what we call burnout set. But what we're trying to do is trying to actually like get a bit of a pause at the top. So if we kind of look down, so we're gonna go into a stretch position, and I've only got the 1 plate here, but generally speaking, I will go a little bit higher so I can get a deeper stretch. But we're trying to stretch and then go into a flat position and then push off the flat position then into your contraction. So it'll be like stretch, flat, and then push up rather than bouncing. So like a lot of people will come in and they'll do this kind of bouncing motion like that. And they'll tend to actually use their Achilles. So they're not really training the calf, the gastroc, they're actually using their Achilles, the tendon, to actually bounce that weight up and down. We're gonna take it in a kind of a phased approach. So we're gonna do a phased lift so that the gastroc, the actual calf, is doing all the actual lifting. So when we're doing that as well, it's very easy with calves to throw a lot of weight on and kind of, as I said there, bounce. Same when people are doing like shrugs and they're kind of bounce up and down. You've got to ask yourself, like, how much are you loading up the actual muscle that you're trying to train, as opposed to how much weight are you moving? Because there's a big difference between moving a weight and then contracting with the muscle through space. And that's what we're always going for, is to actually maximally contract the muscle rather than just bounce aimlessly. So with this as well, in terms of the timing, ideally we'll stretch for 3 seconds. So stretch the calf out for 3 seconds and then go up into the flat position and then hold the contraction then for 3 seconds as well. So 1 rep takes around 7 seconds. And if you do that by 10 or 12, it's an awful lot of time retention. So it's 70 to 80 seconds of constant tension to your calves. So it's fairly hard, as opposed to just, again, bouncing for 10 seconds in a set. So it's a big difference. So now we're going to finish off with the burnout set. So I'm going to strip off a plate and then do 20 reps then of continuous tension. So we're going to try stay up on the top of the range and do little kind of pulsing reps for 20 pulses. And we'll do it straight away. Nice. If you're looking for cool runners as well, these boys, Amazon. Actually, this is a good point. I want to talk about this. Is what footwear you're using when you train, especially for legs and for back. And I nearly always tell people to go for one of these kind of minimalist shoes. So these are like 30, 35 euros on Amazon. They're Saguaro. They're like a generic minimalist shoe. They're excellent for training though, because they give you a stable base to train from. It's a flat sole as well, and there's not loads of cushioning in them. So they're actually allowing you to push maximal force into the ground or into the leg press or whatever you're using. You can actually lift more weight with these on your feet. So they're safer as well than going barefoot, because if you go barefoot, there's a chance of slipping. There's a chance of injury, even with socks on, chance of injury. So, and these are more hygienic as well. So I'd actually highly recommend using a minimalist shoe. And again, Amazon, 30 quid, you don't have to spend a fortune, but if you're training legs, these are, in my opinion, a must. They look hideous and they're not fashionable, but what is fashion? So yeah, if you're looking for a good pair of shoes to train in, these are good. I'm not sponsored, but these are kind of a good one to go for. They're Saguaro. So we just wrapped up the leg session there. And again, it's a quad dominant session that we did with a bit of calves at the end. I'm actually keeping hamstrings for my back session, which is actually tomorrow. But again, you saw we had our kind of our warm-up exercise, or our priming exercise as I call it, with the leg extensions. We had our giant sets there, which were to kind of flood the quads. So again, the volume was very high and we had a lot of stretch placed in the quads. And again, it was to get that kind of that growth response and to get that stress into the quads. And then we went on to our leg press then, and again, going a bit heavier on the leg press with the rest pause sets as well. Again, I'm going to log all this down, and then when we go to this next week, I know there's certain areas where I can go up, definitely on the leg press, and definitely on the giant sets, maybe a little bit up in weight on the giant sets, as far as the reverse lunges, and then as far as the hack squat, there's definitely room to go up there a little bit more next week. But this is actually the first week of this rotation, so it's fine. Then we just finish off then with a little bit of calf raises. And again, we did standing calf raises with that kind of phase lift to make the gastroc have to work really hard with those. And finishing off then with some high volume for the calves. And the one thing I will say is for calves is that like, people will tell me all the time they can't grow calves. And then I always ask them like, how many times a week do you train calves? And they'll tell me maybe once every 2 weeks. And then just ask yourself, would you expect your biceps to grow if you train them once every 2 weeks? Yeah, so it's not genetics. I know genetics count for a lot, but effort counts for a lot as well. So actually making calf training part of your leg routine is the easiest place to start. And at least once, if not twice a week, training calves. And also as well, training calves in a kind of a smart approach, not just bouncing weight, but actually being very controlled and very precise, but actually contracting your calves is key there. So that was our kind of leg session today. As I said, it was kind of emphasis on volume and getting a lot of blood flow to the muscles, and again getting that stretch into the quads. And again, you can stretch what we call stretch overload in the quads, which is where we're applying a lot of stretch and a lot of blood flow into the quads, which is getting again making that growth response happen. So this was a different leg session for me because I've gone through months of doing kind of heavier loading work. So this is just, again, it's a new stimulus and it's another way of growing. So you can actually vary the volume, and I'd actually strongly suggest if you are looking to upgrade your training is to kind of look at varying your volume. So doing high and low volume training and not just being kind of militant in like, I only go for 10 reps and that's it. Go beyond 10, go 15, 20, 30 rep sets every once in a while, you'll get a growth response. Just because you're lifting a bit lighter doesn't mean you're not as much of a man.